Good evening and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider podcast live reaction edition. I'm Zach Ewing, along with Koki Riley, one of the Advocate's LSU beat writers, as we dissect, discuss, react to the news that LSU has fired football coach Brian Kelly. Koki, this was sort of rumored all day long. We heard early on that this is a possibility, that it could happen, that LSU was talking to Brian Kelly about it. But what was your reaction to the news, and how sure were you when it came out this morning that this was going to happen tonight?
This morning, there were suggestions that there could be major changes to the coaching staff, right? And that was a vague sort of indication of, okay, maybe Joe Sloan's the one who moves on. Maybe it's Cortez Hankton, the wide receivers coach. Maybe it's Brad Davis, the offensive line coach. I don't know if I totally expected it to be the head honcho, and that they were going to find the funding for this $54 or $53 million buyout, even though the discussions are still ongoing as to how that's going to be paid and how much of it's going to be paid, to be clear. And so with all that sort of considered, I just sort of figured that it was going to take much longer for them to come to that sort of conclusion. And yet here we are, matter of hours later, and learning that they have in fact moved on from Brian Kelly. And I want to say that I'm shocked, but I probably shouldn't be, just because of how obvious it seemed like he was at the end of the road after this past defeat against Texas A&M, and how, the season was over, quite frankly. And yeah, I mean, it's, but for like all, it's a very, given like the size of the deal and all the complexities and all the parties involved, you figured this would have taken more time. You figured that he would have, went through the rest of the season as maybe a dead man walking. And they would try to use that time to find the money. Right. And no, they just one night, one day, not even one night, one day, they've decided to move on from him. It's pretty remarkable how quickly this thing came together, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to bring on another one of our Advocate writers, Reed Darcy. We can we're all busy trying to get content out about this news and what's next for LSU and how this happened. So let's just all talk together. And I really want to kind of start where you were, Koki, and setting the scene from last night. And Reed, you can chime in on this. Like I really think last night, the second half, obviously, specifically, changed things and sped them up, because LSU's two losses earlier in the year, both by one score to top 10 teams on the road, maybe college football playoff teams on the road, that's one thing. To lose by 30 points, I guess it ended up being 24 points, but to get blown out in Tiger Stadium, even by a good team like Texas A&M, to have your fans out of that stadium by the fourth quarter, to have the fire Kelly chants as he's walking off the field, all of that just, I guess, proved to be too much for Scott Woodward and maybe some very wealthy boosters to handle.
I'm still stunned at how quickly all of this came together. This morning, we were fully prepared for Brian Kelly to make changes to his coaching staff. Under no possibility did we consider the possibility that Brian Kelly would be fired today. And I don't want to step too much on what Koki just said. I don't want to just repeat what he said, but this happened very, very, very quickly. And it's just, that's the most surprising part of it. LSU has 3 losses, yes, but it's 3 losses were all to teams that, could probably wind up in the college football playoff, right? And last night it was an embarrassing loss. It was a very difficult loss for LSU as a program. But just given the size of his buyout, number one, and given the general flux that the university is in, with the fact that the school does not have a permanent president yet, it just felt like that this was what, if this was going to happen, it wouldn't happen in the middle of the season. It would happen at the end of the season once LSU had a month or so to get its ducks in a row. So that's, to me, is the most surprising part of this, is just how things unraveled so quickly for this team and for Brian Kelly. and how now they're going into the bye week before Alabama game without him as their head coach. It's pretty unbelievable.
The number that everyone was mentioning when saying, oh, it'll be given the end of the year, it's the buyout, right? It's this almost $54 million buyout that LSU owes Brian Kelly. And guys, I guess the situation with that is that the official word is that LSU and Kelly are still negotiating that, or Kelly's agent are still negotiating that. Shed some light on what that means, because to me, if I'm Brian Kelly and you're coming and telling me I'm fired, I'm going to say, okay, the contract says $54 million. There's no way out of that. Or do you think Brian Kelly came and said, okay, we can subtract this amount if you do this for me? I mean, what did those negotiations look like?
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Because like, if you're in Brian Kelly's shoes, why would you accept any of these any of these proposals for to have less money in your pocket, right, for the contract that you signed to come down to Baton Rouge and make a very uncomfortable decision, and yeah, like to me it's if he does do that, then there must be some sort of concession, as you said, Zach, that suggests that there must be some sort of concession that's tough for you and I to come up with at the moment. I don't know what you think about this, Ray.
Yeah, I mean, just the possibility that where does he go from here, right? If he were to make it through the end of the season, and LSU would look at it and say, hey man, like, do you really want to try to rebuild this thing and go at it again and really try to get yourself and this program out of this hole? Because it's really, really, really difficult to get a team like this in this position out of this hole. So I was thinking, like, maybe Brian Kelly would agree to a lesser amount of the buyout and just go and sip pina coladas somewhere and just try to enjoy the I guess the quote unquote retirement with all this extra money he would have, instead of going through the stress of another offseason, another transfer portal cycle, another round of coaching hires. It just felt to me like that was a possibility that they would come to broker some kind of agreement where LSU wouldn't be on the hook for the full thing, and Brian Kelly would get to walk away with some cash, but not as much as he was owed now. So I think the decision now has been made to fire him, but it's probably going to be a pretty messy, tumultuous couple weeks here as the two sides try to come to some kind of an agreement. I'm not sure exactly what is transpiring between them, but I've read Bruce Feldman's reporting in The Athletic, and it does not seem like the sides are particularly close to coming to some kind of agreement. So it seems like a very tenuous situation right now.
LSU has no leverage in this discussion. I mean, if you want to fire him, the contract says this is what you owe him to fire him in 2025. So to me, if I'm Brian Kelly and he just is determined to stand hard on that point, or maybe more to the point, his agent is going to stand firm on that point, there's not a lot LSU can do, which tells me that LSU had somebody who's willing to pony up the full amount if necessary. They may, they'll try to do that. They'll try not to, but we'll see what happens. And we'll see what goes forward from that. Moving on to some stuff, guys, because I know we're all kind of in a hurry tonight, but Frank Wilson will be the interim head coach, former head coach at McNeese State, also at UTSA. He also coached LSU in the Texas Bowl in 2022 after Ed Ogeron left, or 2021, excuse me. So he does have, is that not right?
Oh, that was Brad Davis.
I'm sorry,
Brad Davis was the interim.
I'm getting my assistants mixed up, but yeah, Frank Wilson will be the interim coach. He's, I think, the only guy on staff with head coaching experience, and so it makes sense that he is the guy. And I'm for the rest of this season, look, you just get through it. I'm sure what everyone wants to talk about is what's next, and y'all can feel free to leave your comments on Facebook or YouTube. What you think. We got Brandon here saying Drinkwitz, that's the Missouri head coach. I know a lot of people have said Blake Baker could be the next coach. John Summerall at Tulane. Lane Kiffin's name has been out there. Koki, you are tasked with coming up with our first hot board that is going up on theadvocate.com at some point soon. So what names are you hearing or thinking? I think Koki, are you muted? We can't hear Koki right now. Nope. Still not hearing anything from Koki.
Hear you, Koki. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, I'm gonna let's take Koki off and see if we can just add him back on. He's gonna reboot. But Reed, I'll ask you the same question. I mean, I've just mentioned a few names. Are those the kind of names on your radar, or do you have others?
Yeah, I'd imagine that LSU is going to go after a coach, a sitting head coach right now. I don't think they'll be hiring a first-time head coach. I don't think this is quite the job for that kind of Saban. Well, Saban said yesterday, didn't he say yesterday that he wasn't coming back to coach? As my dog is trying to get in over here.
Does your dog want to coach?
Yeah, she might. I don't know. It's just okay. So first names, if you look in the SEC, everyone's going to say Lane Kiffin first. We don't know if how willing he is to leave Florida. I'm sorry, we don't know how willing he is to leave Ole Miss. There's reports linking him to the Florida job. We don't know how true there are. Other SEC coaches, Eli Drinkwitz, done a great job at Missouri. Clark Lee's done a great job at Vanderbilt. If you want to go to the Group of 5 level, John Sumrall would be a pretty natural fit, given the fact that he's already coaching in Louisiana. He's already been recruiting Louisiana, and he's done a great job with the Tulane program where it's really hard to win. Other than that, you can go after some retreads. James Franklin would be a name that might get thrown around a little bit, but would LSU take him on, given that he kind of has some of the same struggles as Brian Kelly has had playing in big games throughout his career? Yeah, it's those 6 names right off the bat. There's probably one that could come up that I haven't named, but that's, I think, the core group of names that I think you'll see linked to it right at the start.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention here that Brian Kelly was on nobody's list of possible names after Ed Ogeron left. So Scott Woodward and to that point, Kim Mulkey was on nobody's list of names for the women's basketball job that Scott Woodward made the hire for. He is going to take big swings, whether he connects on one of them and whether that works, because obviously Brian Kelly is an example of one that did not work. Nobody knows. But some other interesting names, Joe Brady, who's the Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator. Does he want to get back into college coaching?
He doesn't.
Yeah, that would be your concern there. Bill Wall says John Gruden. Wouldn't that be interesting? I don't know. I think it's an interesting time because the other framework of this read is that Penn State is open. Florida is open. We don't, Steve Sarkisian tried to shoot down rumors, but usually where there's smoke, there's fire. Would Texas come open? Would Oklahoma come open if they continue to struggle? I mean, there are so many big jobs open that LSU is going to be competing with. LSU may be the best of those, though.
Yeah, LSU is one of the best jobs in the country. It's one of those 100,000 seat stadium schools, and those schools are a cut above the rest in terms of, just the level of investment it has within this program. But you also have to keep in mind that this athletic department and this school is going to be committing a lot of money to Brian Kelly for the next 5 or 6 years, depending what they agree to the buyout. So how much does that hamstring your ability to go get a coach, a top-tier coach that you want, given the fact that a lot of your money is going to be tied up into Brian Kelly and into the previous staff? And I'd imagine all these coaches are going to have questions about the leadership at this school. Who's calling the shots here? Is it Jeff Landry? Is it one of the candidates for president? Is Scott Woodward? Does he have the authority to go through a coaching search and make another hire? I think these are lots of questions that we don't have answers to right now, but that if I'm a coach out there and I'm thinking about, flirting with the LSU job, leaving where I am right now, these are serious concerns that I have, for that process, because, if I'm a coach and I have options, I don't know if I would want to jump at an opportunity like this, though it's a great opportunity, but it might not be a very stable one. And they might kick me to the curb after 4 years, even though I won 10 games and 10 games and 9 games in the first 3. That's something that I'd imagine these coaches and their agents are looking at.
You are watching the LSU Insider Live Reaction Podcast. We are brought to you by Jerry Lee and Cadillac. You can command the road in a Cadillac where luxury, power, and presence come together. Experience it today at Jerry Lane Cadillac. LSU Sports Insider Podcast is twice every week, plus post-game shows on Saturdays. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, all of that stuff. Hit the like button. Leave a comment about what you think about LSU firing Brian Kelly. Reed, this got wild the last time. We had the Lincoln Riley flirtations. We had Brian Kelly out of left field. We had all sorts of names. And given some of the reporting, by our own Wilson Alexander, also by Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, this was a pretty wild last 24 hours, or really last 20 hours for LSU. We had the
8 hours.
Yeah. I mean, just the extended post-game wait last night for Brian Kelly. You have Scott Woodward walking out of his press conference. Apparently, they had discussions today about possibly firing Joe Sloan. Kelly pushed back against that. He wanted to make different staff changes. It got tense. I mean, this is wild. And I don't know that kind of drama is what you want if you're LSU.
Right. You don't know who's calling the shots. A big question I have is Scott Woodward going to is Scott Woodward going to be able to make this next hire? Because this was his big swing. Credit to Scott Woodward. He brought in Kim Mulkey for the LSU women's basketball team, and that has worked out great. Brought in Jay Johnson, again, wonderful hire. Hit that one out the park. But, this was his big swing. This is his signature hire. This was his football hire, the one he wanted to make. He did not hire Ed Ogeron, but he fired Ed Ogeron pretty quickly. And this was his big swing. This is what he stuck his LSU tenure on. He planted his flag on Brian Kelly and saying, this football coach is my football coach, and we're going to be aligned, and we're going to be together in this, and we're going to be on the same page, and we're going to try to win championships and bring the program back to what it was in 2019 when he took over. And now after only 4 years, he fired, or I don't even know if he fired Brian Kelly, but somebody fired Brian Kelly, and now that's over. So the powers that be, the people who are pulling the strings, whoever it is right now, do they also fire Scott Woodward, and do they bring in their own AD? That's another big question that you have to answer in the coming weeks, because this is going to start heating up pretty quickly, right? It's only a month out until the regular season. You have to worry about the transfer portal. You need a coaching staff in place before that heats up in December. So yeah, it's quite a mess right now, a lot in flux, and all these coaches are probably looking at it, and I'd imagine they're excited about the opportunity to coach at LSU, but they have a little bit unease about how this whole situation played out with BK.
Yeah, well, we're going to welcome in Scott Rabalais, advocate columnist, who is, I'm sure, feverishly working. Reed, I don't know, are you working on something on deadline? Do you need to hop off?
Kind of, but I'm almost done with it, so I got time.
Okay, we'll leave this as a three-way discussion then for now, but welcoming in Scott as he just has a few minutes to talk before working on his column. But what are your general reactions here? LSU firing Brian Kelly in a very quick, kind of surprising timing move, Scott.
Yeah, I think a little perspective is in order. I mean, let's go back less than 2 months ago, the night of August 30th, when after LSU won at Clemson 17-10. And to think then, if you told me then that we'd be where we are now on October 26th, that Brian Kelly would be fired, I would have said, there's no way. And they're on their way. They're going to the college football playoff, right? Maybe much more. Kelly's finally got it all put together. They just beat a really good team on the road, and it's all in rep. This is how fast things can happen now in college football. It's shocking, but after what happened with Penn State and James Franklin, it's not that shocking, I guess, anymore. But I guess the old axiom by Jeremy Foley, the former Florida athletic director, came to pass yet again. What must be done eventually must be done immediately. And I guess that's what LSU decided after a very ugly scene in Tiger Stadium last night, on the field, in the stands, everything. But wow, I mean, it's just amazing that LSU potentially could pony up all this money and part with Kelly, who, I worked out his winning percentage, 708. It's not like it was I've covered a lot of fired LSU football coaches over the years. The first one was Curly Hallman. He was the first guy to coach LSU more than 1 year, the only guy to coach more than 1 year to leave with a career-losing record. Jared DiNardo got fired. He didn't have a career-losing record. Mike Archer got fired, didn't have a career-losing record. Ed Orgeron got fired, didn't have a career-losing record. Les Miles got fired, didn't have a career-losing record. It's it's a demanding place, and it's only gotten more demanding now that we're in the college football playoff era. But 2 fails in a row could get you fired. And LSU failed to make the college football playoff. You could certainly say 3 in a row, because in 2023 they had the offense, obviously, that was great enough to go to the playoff, and the defense was so bad. And then last year they failed to make it, and this year they failed to make it. So yeah, that's how we got here. But it's wild nonetheless. It's been a wild day, but it's after. I thought this was inevitable. I just didn't think it was going to happen this quickly. Yeah,
no doubt about it. And I do want to your comment, Rab, on just, I don't know if disorganization is the right word, but maybe just the chaotic nature of how this came about. I mean, we've seen reports of tense discussions between Scott Woodward and Brian Kelly that took place today, and he's fired by the end. That sort of gut reaction, the governor is involved. I mean, only in Louisiana would that happen. It feels like this has just been chaotic.
Zach, remind me where you're from. Where's your hometown?
Albuquerque, New Mexico. That would not happen in New Mexico.
No, this is and Reed Darcy is from New Orleans. I'm from Baton Rouge. This is how things happen in Louisiana. It's messy. It's chaotic. It's crazy. It's rough and tumble. It's governors getting involved and all these kind of things. And this doesn't surprise me at all that it was a mess. Like it's often messy. Firing coaches is not often a clean break. And maybe Kelly could have saved his job. I don't think so. I think eventually, if they'd gone on to lose, say, to Alabama and lose to Oklahoma and finish 7-5, and they're going to the Liberty Bowl or something like that. I don't mean to besmirch these bowls, but it's not where LSU wants to be this year. Then this could have happened eventually. But it's well, I guess eventually the whole story will come out, to how it actually worked out. But ultimately, I think after last night, we were headed here.
My question is, what is the urgency to do it today? I know it's the bye week. I know last night was terrible for LSU, but what is the urgency to fire him right now instead of a month from now at the end of the regular season? I know something might have happened in that meeting with Scott Woodward, as Bruce Feldman reported at The Athletic, but why today? Why not just go through the next 4 games of this schedule with him as your lame duck and just make sure you have everything squared away before you pull the trigger on firing him and buying him out of his contract? That's what I am trying to wrap my head around right now. Why this very moment? Why did this all come together seemingly in an afternoon?
Well, I think this was in motion before today or before last night even. It's like things are not heading in the right direction, and it's also next year. I think everyone knew that 2026 was going to be a tough year to begin to, no matter what, even if you had a lot of success this year, because you're going to lose most of the starters in defense. You're going to lose Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback, even if he hasn't played great this year. And so I think, and there's been a bunch of firings already. This is, 3 of the top 15, certainly top 20 jobs in the country are now open. LSU, Penn State, and Florida. Then you got Virginia Tech, UCLA, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, Stanford. You could add Florida State and Auburn and maybe even Colorado and Wisconsin and Kentucky and some other schools to the mix eventually this season. I think it's the dynamic has changed. And although LSU has fired a lot of coaches before the end of the season, Curly Hallman went before the end of the year, Mike Archer, Ed Orgeron, Les Miles. This has been done a lot at LSU over the years, certainly in my recollection. And so I think they just felt they had to kind of get ahead of the curve, though, and show people, hey, look, we mean business. We're serious. We want to find the next great coach to come to LSU, and try to figure out who that's going to be. And but I understand what you're saying, Reed. But it's like, I think it's not. I don't think it's that unusual anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I guess you want to get as much of a head start as you possibly can, because I know they moved back. They shortened the portal window and they moved it to January. But let's not kid ourselves. All of the portal activity is going to be happening behind closed doors before the window.
LSU's going to need to do that if you want to have a shot to do anything in 2026. Yeah, you got to move quickly.
I mean, to that point, and we can turn this into a discussion about maybe the names that come to the top of your name that it will be on LSU's list, Rab. But Lane Kiffin's not going anywhere before then. He's got a team that's going to be in the playoff. Is he going to leave an Ole Miss team that's going to be in the playoff to come portal shop for Florida or LSU? You're also entering a landscape where you've got jobs like Florida and Penn State, two of the only jobs in the country that can compete with LSU for coaches' attention. So I'm curious to know what you think of the landscape LSU is entering here, and some of the names that maybe are at the top of your list, or that you think may be at the top of Scott Woodward's list.
Scott Woodward's list. That's an interesting list, because is he going to be the one making most of the decisions, leading this whole thing? I don't know. That's going to be very interesting. Because he's got this huge buyout that's on his resume, and the Jimbo Fisher buyout that's on his resume. The two biggest currently, as the way it stands, the two biggest buyouts in college football history.
Although he did not give Jimbo that ill-advised extension in 2022.
No, he hired him the original contract.
Yes.
That's right. That is true. That is true. I'm looking forward to writing this column, but I'll give you a little taste of it. My first call is to Nick Saban. I say, Nick Saban, Nick, tell me no. Make Nick Saban tell you no. That I don't want to coach anymore. And you say, okay, Nick, who do you think should our next call be to? And he's probably going to say Lane Kiffin or Dan Lanning or some name of that caliber, and then you go from there. That may sound simplistic, but that's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, he has swung big. There's only a few coaches I think around who would fit the criterion of a big swing and also would take the job. Like Curt Cignetti at Indiana is a great coach. He's also 64 years old and just signed a massive extension. He's probably off the table. Dan Lanning would be a huge swing. Is Dan Lanning going to leave a great situation at Oregon? So now you're going down to, I don't know, Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz. I'm blanking on his name at Texas Tech. Like, there's not that many coaches out there.
He's not a spring chicken either, I don't think.
Yeah, who fit the criteria of a sitting Power 4 coach that has had success and who would also take the job. And you're competing with Florida and Penn State for those names. So unless LSU has somebody in mind and they want to take a swing at him, or they do call Nick Saban and Saban says, I'm going to, I full circle want to go back to where I kind of started this whole thing, not where he started, but where he really became highly successful. I'm not sure that this is a difficult thing to pull off for LSU.
It is. I don't really know who you go after. I guess the top two names, aside from, the pipe dream of Saban or Dan Lanning, I guess it would be Clark Lee or Eli Drinkwitz or Lane Kiffin. I guess those would be kind of in a tier of themselves in terms of established SEC coaches that have been at their programs for a while and have proven that they can do something where it's a little bit harder to win in the SEC. But again, the playoff factor there, Lane Kiffin's probably going to be playing into January. Vanderbilt looks like they're going to be in the playoff as well. The timing of it has to work out. So then at that point, do you pivot to maybe a coach from the group of five? Now, I know when I mentioned this, I know exactly what Rab's going to say about John Summerall. I can hear it right now. What Rab's going to say is that LSU's not going to want to hire the Tulane coach. But if the Tulane coach is the right coach and he just so happens to be at Tulane, shouldn't LSU try to take a swing at him if he's the right guy, if they decide that he's the right guy?
I suppose. I just think that's politically difficult to pull off. I really do. But I suppose it could. He is 6-1 and 3-0 in the conference. Yeah, they can still make the playoff as well. So obviously they got the big games left. I think they play Memphis and South Florida still. So That's remained to be like the playoff certainly complicates things. It's not like you're done on January 1st anymore. Obviously,
right.
Things are just kind of getting started.
Unless you lose in the first round, then you're done December.
Well, that's true. That's true. LSU needs to hope for Ole Miss to get if they want Kiffin, they got to hope for them to get a couple of upset losses. I'm looking at the AP top 25. Ryan Day is not leaving. Signetti's got a new deal. Elko, you wouldn't think is making a lateral move to LSU from Texas A&M. DeBoer is not leaving Alabama. Kirby is not leaving Georgia. Dan Lanning, you got to at least test those waters.
You can call
Georgia Tech's coach, Brent Key.
Yeah,
that's an interesting one. That's an interesting one. 8-0. I mean, their best season in my lifetime. I believe best off their best start since 1966. Clark Lee, I think you'd have to consider him. I mean, what they've done there is remarkable. I know it's his alma mater and everything. Kalani Sitake, again, that doesn't feel like a right fit. Cristobal at Miami, I don't think I just don't think he's a good coach. It would be ironic for Freeman for LSU to go after Freeman at Notre Dame. He's in Notre Dame, I don't think so. The Texas Tech coach is an interesting one. Of course, he's bankrolled. Heupel at Tennessee seems to have hit his ceiling. The Virginia coach, maybe. Braum at Louisville. I think talk about a guy who's won big games.
Yeah.
I
believe he's a Louisville graduate, though.
He is, but it's Louisville.
Yeah,
Cincinnati, you don't know much about him. Venables, no. Eli Drinkwitz, I think so, but he's you're a Missouri guy, Zach. I mean, has he won enough big games, or has it been kind of frustrating that they kind of bumped their head?
Yeah, I don't know what the record is, but somebody posted something the other day that I saw that he's like got a terrible record. I don't remember 5-30 or something to that effect against SEC teams that finished with a winning conference record. I mean, he's basically he's beat everybody he should beat. Basically perfect against teams he should beat, doesn't win the really big games. So does LSU want that? And then, the other thing is, I believe Eli Drinkwitz is a top 10 paid coach in the country already. So again, any of these names, maybe money is just not an object, but you've got to consider you're already paying the buyout. You're going to be competing with Florida and Penn State and maybe others for some of these names. And so at some point I don't know, what is James Franklin a name that would, I mean, it feels like but do you think he would be of interest to LSU?
It has to be, but I think that's a tough sell because I can hear what the fans are going to say already. You're hiring a slightly younger Brian Kelly. I mean, you're hiring a guy who's done a lot of the same things. Lost a lot of big games. Just going a little farther down the list, Willie Fritz at Houston, former Tulane coach. I think he's like 65, but Joey McGuire is the coach of Texas Tech, by the way, and he's 54. Willie Fritz has done quite well whenever he is 65. But is that a little less of a thing now with somebody like Signetti doing as well as he did? I just think you have to go younger if you're LSU than Brian Kelly, who turned 64 yesterday.
And are we thinking about the LSU job? Are we thinking about it from a 2025 frame of reference, or are we thinking about it from a 2018 frame of reference? We have to, adjust for the fact that this is a new world of college football. Is Lane Kiffin taking that big of a step up from Ole Miss to LSU? You think he was, given the, recruiting advantages and given the size of the stadium and the overall financial resources. But if you know how to work the portal and if you know how to raise money, what's stopping you from winning at a program like LSU, winning at a program like Ole Miss, maybe as equally or more than you can at a program like LSU if you can't get it rolling there. So how good is this job, and is it as good, as we think it is, or do we have some adjusting to do before we start to consider if these coaches can really take the leap, or if they're making even a leap at all?
I've seen a couple of comments here about Joe Brady from Darren, and I guess Darren.
Joe Brady does not like recruiting.
Joe Brady's a year away from being an NFL head coach.
He got out of college football as quickly as he could because he did not like recruiting. Now he's about to get an NFL head coach in a year or two. So
Yeah.
And I might say the same thing for Kelvin Shepard, the former LSU linebacker, who's the Detroit Lions defensive coordinator. His name may come up. I wouldn't be surprised. He's done very well and has made a meteoric rise, but he's probably bound for an NFL head coaching job eventually as well. So,
did you throw out the name Jed Fish, Rab? The Washington head coach is another possibility. That's where Alabama went for their last head coach. I don't know. Just kind of looking through top 25 and guys who have done a good job. He did a good job at Arizona and now seems to have Washington rolling too.
Yes, they've won pretty well there. That's be somebody you'd have to look at. Like you rarely get your first choice, right? I mean, I remind everyone when LSU hired Nick Saban, they were about to start interviewing coordinators because they couldn't find anybody a head coach with a resume to be the guy, and then Nick Saban fell in their lap because Jimmy Sexton reached out to a friend of Joe Dean's, the athletic director, and said Nick would be willing to talk. Mm-hmm. So you never know where it's going to come from, but it's and look, it's always a crapshoot. It's always a crapshoot. There's no person out there that you go except Nick Saban. I think still. He's going to be 74 next week. I still think he could give you a couple of 2 or 3 years and put you on a path to set you up to the next guy. But, that would be something. I'll never forget what he said to me when he was leaving. He was at a book signing or something like that. And he said, we may look back on our years at LSU as the best years of our lives, meaning like him and his wife, Terry. And I don't know if he still feels that way after being at Alabama so long, but I think he wishes he hadn't left. He wished then he hadn't left. And that's interesting. I don't think he's going to come back to college football coaching, but I would make him tell me no.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about this as we go forward. We know both of you are very busy tonight, so we've already probably been on the air longer than I intended to, but I appreciate everybody hanging out. I know it's a big time, and we'll continue to be as we look forward to the LSU Sports Insider. Don't know if we'll have a show tomorrow. We might let this breathe for 24 hours and have a show Tuesday, but we will be talking about it this week. Reed, you're shaking your head.
I just can't believe that that we're at this position now, and neither can my dog, who's
can't believe it either.
she's wondering who they're going to hire. She's like, who are they going to hire? I don't know. I don't know, Charlie. I don't know who they're hiring. So
just wants to go for a walk, man.
Yeah,
that's all. Yeah. All right, Rab, thanks for hanging out. We'll let you get to your column and read you as well. And everybody in the comments, appreciate all of y'all's passion as always. And we will be back with more LSU Sports Insider podcasts later this week.